cameras were live, the tension undeniable, and the stakes higher than anyone anticipated. On one side sat a man who had built his career on loyalty to power, confident that his words would control the narrative. On the other, a rising congresswoman, with a fire that could not be extinguished. Kash Patel thought he could belittle Jasmine Crockett and walk away unscathed. But within minutes, his plan unraveled. What followed was not just a heated exchange, it was a dismantling so powerful that it left Patel speechless. The audience in shock, and millions across the country replaying the moment again and again. Kash Patel's name was already well known. In Washington circles, a loyalist, strategist, and operator, he had spent years navigating the murky waters of political power. His reputation was not built on compassion or justice, but on defense of those in power. Defense of institutions that benefited the few while overlooking the many. For him, debates were nothing more than stages to assert dominance and craft narratives, always assuming his opponents would falter under pressure. Across from him, however, sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, a woman who had built her career in a very different way. She wasn't born into the polished world of political elites. Instead, her credibility came from the communities she served, people marginalized, dismissed, and often ignored. Her reputation as a fierce advocate for racial and social justice was not manufactured. It was forged through lived struggle, through relentless truth-telling, through refusing to be silenced when others wanted her quiet. Producers of the televised debate expected fireworks. They believed Patel's seasoned presence would give him the edge. Crockett, they assumed, would hold her own but struggle against his relentless attacks. What they didn't account for was the depth of her preparation, or the resilience she carried within her. As the lights dimmed and the opening remarks began, Patel looked calm, even smug, certain he could dominate. Crockett appeared steady, her eyes sharp, as if she was waiting for the perfect moment. What the audience didn't yet know was that they were about to witness a clash that would expose not just to political figures, but the power dynamics that define American politics itself. From the very start, Patel went on the offensive. His strategy was clear: discredit Crockett, undermine her authority, and frame her as inexperienced and emotional. He dismissed her arguments with a smirk, leaning on his years in Washington as proof that his perspective carried more weight. Just what he said it was how he said it. His tone dripped with condescension. Every word a reminder of the old political playbook used to silence women, especially women of color. In positions of power, for many watching, his approach was familiar. It echoed the countless times voices, like Crockett's, had been diminished, erased, or written off as unworthy of serious debate. Yet Crockett didn't interrupt.
Ow.
She didn't flinch. Instead, she listened. She allowed Patel to dig deeper into his own arrogance, each word fueling the very trap he was setting for himself. As he grew bolder, his attacks became sharper. He questioned her knowledge, mocked her priorities, and even implied that her fight for racial justice was little more than political theater. The audience shifted in their seats, some nodding in discomfort, others leaning forward with anticipation. It was clear Patel believed he was winning. His performance would trend across headlines the next day, but Crockett knew better. She had lived through dismissals like this her entire career. She understood that his arrogance wasn't unique, was systemic. His attacks weren't just about her. They were about every person who had ever been told their voice didn't matter. Behind her calm expression, she was preparing not just to respond, but to dismantle him completely. By now, the atmosphere in the studio had changed. The audience sensed something brewing, something bigger than a debate. Patel continued, his confidence swelling, unaware that his downfall was moments away. And when Crockett finally leaned forward, ready to speak, the silence that filled the air was electric. Everyone watching, in the studio and across the country, knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. Jasmine Crockett spoke with precision, her words cutting through the room like thunder. She dismantled Patel's arguments piece by piece, exposing his spin for what it was: hollow rhetoric built on protecting power at the expense of people. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The strength in her tone came from undeniable truth. She reminded the audience of the policies Patel had defended, the ones that left communities vulnerable, the ones that widened the gap between the privileged and the marginalized. She contrasted his words with lived reality, weaving stories of families who bore the brunt of political decisions made by people like him. Each fact, each example, left Patel with fewer defenses. But then came the moment that turned the debate. From heated exchange to national reckoning. Crockett called out not just Patel's words, but the undertones behind them, the arrogance, the dismissal, the attempt to silence her because of who she was and what she represented. She named it for what it was, the continuation of a long tradition of minimizing women of color in power, of painting their voices as too emotional, too unqualified, too inconvenient. The room fell silent. Patel shifted uncomfortably, his confidence faltering. He tried to interject, but his words stumbled. For the first time, he wasn't the one in control. Crockett's voice rose, not in anger, but in unshakable certainty. Her presence was not a threat. It was a reflection of the people. No amount of belittlement could erase that truth. The audience erupted. Gasps gave way to applause, the kind of reaction that reverberated with history. Patel, once so sure of his dominance, was left speechless. On live television, the power dynamics had shifted, and it was undeniable who had emerged victorious. The debate ended, but the fallout had just begun. Clips of Crockett's comeback spread like wildfire, dominating social media within hours. Millions replayed the moment, sharing it with captions that captured the significance. "This is how you speak truth to power." Headlines highlighted Patel's discomfort, contrasting it with Crockett's unshakable composure. Patel's team scrambled to spin the narrative, framing the exchange as overblown, but the damage was done. The image of him squirming as Crockett spoke became symbolic of a broader shift in American politics, one where voices long silenced are now amplified. One where privilege no longer guarantees victory. For women across the country, Crockett's response wasn't just inspiring, it was vindicating. It reflected the countless times they had been dismissed, talked over, or told they didn't belong. For communities fighting for justice, it was validation that their struggles could no longer be ignored. And for the younger generation watching, it was proof that resilience and truth can shatter even the most arrogant displays of power. This moment was about more than Crockett and Patel. It was about a reckoning with the structures that had silenced too many for too long. It was about courage in the face of arrogance, and truth standing firm against privilege. And as the clip continued to circulate, one question echoed louder than all the applause. If one voice could dismantle arrogance so completely on live television, what could happen when millions more rise together? Because in the end, Jasmine Crockett didn't just destroy Kash Patel, she destroyed the illusion that voices like hers could ever be silenced again.